All right, gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We are going to have the session for the AI-enabled solutions that are powering today's support teams. Our speakers for today are Anthony Humphreys, the president from BlackBeltHelp's, and Brandon Black, the VP of Sales Engineering for Quick Launch. There are long, wonderful bios for these gentlemen, but I believe you'd rather hear from them than me actually read them for you. So we're going to go ahead and dive right into the session, and I'm going to hand it over to Brandon. Brandon, here you go.
Thank you, Danya. Appreciate your introduction. Can we go to the outline, please, for the slides for the presentation? So what we're going to do is do a quick introduction to Quick Launch and its identity and access management. We're going to spend a little time with an introduction to the AI-enabled solutions for help desk support. How do you evaluate and compare AI technology for your campus? Talk about leveraging chatbots and virtual assistants, and then we're going to talk a little bit about real-life case studies and successful AI implementations that have been worked on so far. So that's kind of the topics that we're going to cover over the next few minutes, and we're lucky to have Anthony with us to be able to discuss some of these things. Next slide, please. So Quick Launch. Quick Launch is an identity and access management solution. I'm the Vice President of Sales Engineering for Quick Launch, and we are a full-blown identity and access management product that gives you all the capabilities that you would typically like to see in a identity IAM platform, with adaptive authentication, single sign-on, and passwordless solutions. We also have some machine learning and some AI built into the product as well, as it's critical that we understand who is getting access to the applications and when they're getting access to these applications. We identify through some AI who these people are, kind of a fingerprint of your browser. We figure out location, geofencing, and a lot of other things about who you are before you ever log into an application through some AI and some machine learning technologies. So we're pretty proud of that. And we also have a full-blown provisioning tool built in for the identity management as well. So that's something that we're pretty proud of. It's kind of our crown jewel, which is the automated provisioning. But we're going to talk a little bit more about some AI technologies. Next slide, please. Here's some recent, in the last couple of months, some of the recently onboarded clients for Quick Launch. We have been in the higher education space for the most part. It was built by higher education for higher education. So that's where our focus has been, is in the higher education space. We do have some other verticals as well, but higher education is really where we've been focused. Next. So Anthony, I'm glad that you're participating with us today. Thank you very much for taking your time. Can you give us a little bit of a background on BlackBeltHelp and its history and kind of the focus of BlackBeltHelp business?
Yeah, I sure can. And thanks, Brandon, for moderating and leading us as well. And for those that don't know, of course, Quick Launch is a partner product that we've worked with quite extensively over the years. But a quick background, a little bit about myself. My background was in higher ed. I was a financial aid director and a VP of students for many years at institutions in California, both community colleges and four-year publics. I then went to work at Ellucian, running product management, and then at another outsourcing company, and then came here about 5 years ago and took over as president. But BlackBeltHelp has been here for about 17 years, give or take 6 months or so. And the way that I would characterize it is kind of what I call our superpower, our secret sauce. And that secret sauce is really all about student, faculty, and staff engagement. Everything in our kind of wheelhouse and everything that we do every morning when we get up every day is focused on how can we increase engagement to those constituents on campus. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. You can see kind of there on the left, our core business support. That's our inbound and outbound contact center as a service and contact center engagement solutions. What that really means is when we work with clients, across the country. We serve only higher education, so we don't focus on healthcare or banking or anything but higher ed. We believe in being single-threaded when it comes to serving students, staff, and faculty, but especially students. It's just a unique market in higher ed. And within higher ed, of course, there are differences between four-year publics and two-year publics and four-year privates and for-profits. So it really is critical, we feel, especially when you're looking at student, staff, and faculty engagement, to really focus on those areas. And we can take inbound support in a number of different modes. We'll talk about that in a moment, from any of those areas that you see on the left, whether that's admissions, financial aid, IT support, LMS, student accounts, military veterans benefits, etc. We have about 200 plus or so clients across the country. One of our largest clients is the California Community College System, all 115 of them. And we provide support for them for IT support, but also, of course, for their online student application tool. We serve about about 4.5 million students nationwide. And we handle, again, a little bit higher now, about 1.6 million interactions each year with our team that is based here in the US and overseas as well. So that's a quick overview.
Interesting. What's driven Black Belt Help from its core deliveries to the new products and services you're offering?
Yeah, I think it's a great question too. And what we have found, I guess I would say that there are two primary drivers. One, of course, are our clients. Our clients have really said over the years, when we first started with IT and LMS support, their first questions within a few years were things like, hey, why can't you support students in the areas of financial aid or admissions, records, or registration, in addition to those areas? So we added that expertise to our team and started offering those services many years ago. But about 5 years ago, again, our clients came to us and said, we really love that 24/7 model for support. Our phones have gone silent, frankly, across campus, right? We sort of take in and triage all different modes of communication from across the campus, answering all those different questions. But very quickly, institutions started to say things like, boy, we really would love to have things like a chatbot. And even beyond a chatbot, an integrated bot, so that bot maybe can answer questions as well as a staff person could. We also then knew that what was challenging on campus was using different systems to answer questions. So in our contact centers here in the US and overseas, depending on what tools the colleges have, whether that's an ERP or an SIS, an LMS, a CRM, any number of different systems that are typically today not connected. In other words, it's very rare that an LMS and an SIS and a CRM are all talking to each other in real time. And what that means is it makes it really challenging to provide top-notch service and never have to transfer a student or say that we'll transfer you to someone else that can help you. Student, staff, and faculty are all the same in this one regard, where they want to get questions answered very, very quickly and in one environment, in one sort of mode, whether that mode is a two-way text, a phone call, a web ticket, a chat bot, etc. That's really been what has driven us to this new offering. And then the last piece I mentioned too, that's the first one, were our clients. The second one, of course, was the market. And the market has shifted very, very quickly in the last several years with regards to the power and the abilities of AI. So we'll talk about that in a little bit in more depth, but those are the two big reasons that we've really tried to evolve over time, and really to make sure that we can meet our client needs, be it staff, student, or faculty needs, but across the board, and be a single provider for those services.
Hey, Anthony, there's a lot of information in the market. Everywhere you go, you see everything about AI. When you say AI, what are you referring to?
Well, and I think that's a great question, right? Because everyone has heard of ChatGPT and all the different features and functions that that entails. And of course, as we all know in the news recently, there have been a number of very, very high-level technology summits with folks like world leaders and industry leaders looking at the power and, frankly, some of the dangers of AI. So it's a great question. We have a kind of a quick video that I think will help answer that question. Sometimes a minute or two video is worth 1,000 words. So we'll start with that. So if you want to play that video, that'd be great.
Artificial intelligence is a technology that enables machines to process data and respond like humans. AI technology is powered by algorithms and can be used to identify objects and faces, predict outcomes, and complete complex tasks. AI has evolved tremendously over the years and is now capable of natural language processing like Google Assistant, Siri, Alexa, image recognition like SenseTime. Additionally, AI has also found practical applications in various sectors such as healthcare, finance, and retail. What does AI do? AI chatbots are immensely powerful tools that can be used to automate customer service, provide personalized guidance, improve customer engagement, and enrich the customer experience. AI can respond to customer inquiries, provide product recommendations, and handle complex data sets. AI chatbots can also be used to automate mundane tasks, providing time-saving benefits to businesses and organizations. How can colleges and universities use AI? Chatbots are customized to reflect the unique needs and culture of each institution, making them an invaluable asset for improving student engagement, retention, and satisfaction. From answering basic campus questions to providing academic support, artificial intelligence (AI) is helping higher ed to work smarter, not harder. How can chatbots serve students? Chatbots enable self-service for students, providing 24/7 instant access and support. Chatbots provide students with the ability to easily search for information and get their questions answered. Chatbots empower students to take charge of their own learning, enable independent problem-solving with immediate access to support, improving student satisfaction and reducing support costs. BlackBeltHelp, improving the student experience seamlessly.
Well, hopefully that video helped a little bit. I know there was a lot covered there. I think at the end of the day, what is super critical is making sure that students feel like they can get immediate support via whatever mode they prefer. Some folks that are maybe in my generation would prefer to make a phone call or have a live experience with an agent and ask multiple questions from across the enterprise or the institution. But today's younger students, for the most part, are really looking for interactions with a chatbot. And they want the chatbot to be more than just an FAQ bot, right? They want to ask more questions than just, is the school open today? What's the Title IV school code for the institution that I'm considering attending? They also want to ask integrated questions, things like, has my FAFSA been received? How much aid do I have? Have I been admitted? What is my current balance? And additional questions. So we'll talk about that in a moment. But that hopefully gives folks a sense of, in a sense, I guess, putting some guardrails around what AI is and what we're going to talk about today. Some of the things that we're probably not going to talk about today are some of the things that are very, very cutting edge with AI that are outside of the boundaries of higher ed, right? So things like cognitive thinking chatbots. Right? Those are things that maybe in a medical setting, someone can say, here are my symptoms. Can you give me a basic diagnosis? Chatbots can do those things. They can be very, very powerful and they can pull data from enormous data sets and give recommendations. We're not going to cover those today because those are some of the things that, though other industries are using chatbots to do that, we're going to focus more on the higher ed side and what students, staff, and faculty can really expect from AI, if that makes sense.
Very cool. So what's the problem? I mean, what are the pain points that you're trying to solve?
Yeah, I think, and it's always good to start a question or at least an opening with, what are we trying to accomplish? So that's kind of that initial question that I mentioned a moment ago. We're going to focus on higher ed, and we're really, for the most part, going to focus on students. I don't mean to ignore in any way faculty or staff. They have incredible needs as well. But just for today's purposes, I'm going to focus a little bit more on students. And the pain points that we're really trying to solve are when students reach out for help. In many cases, they look at either calling or texting or chatting with an institution, somewhat akin to doing their taxes every year. It's unfortunate. It's probably an unfair analogy, but it's the analogy nonetheless. And I guess what I would do, I know we have just a number of institutions, which is great on the webinar today. I would ask you to ask yourself, if you surveyed and you walked out to your kind of general quad on your campus and you picked out 100 students and you asked them, how easy is it for you to get support today on my campus? So we're not going to ask anybody to give answers. I will just remember my campus. I was a financial aid director and a VP of students again at community colleges in California. And if I asked 100 students, are you thrilled, like a 9.5 out of 10 or higher in terms of customer service, I think I would honestly get crickets, and I would probably get a lot of feedback that was quite targeted. And I think students are finally kind of finding their voice today and saying things like, regardless of my tuition, whether I'm at Cornell University or I'm at UVA or I'm at Blue Ridge Community College here in Virginia, I have the right to expect the same top-notch service that I expect in terms of top-notch teaching and learning. And that's really, I think, the pain that we're trying to solve today. We know that institutions do a fantastic job with teaching and learning. Where institutions are struggling, and we're hearing this from institutions, where they're struggling is, how do we keep up with just the increasing flood and tidal wave of service requests? And not just from sort of 9 to 5, but they're telling us, and we're seeing it as well, that at the time of 1 a.m. at night or 10 p.m. in the evening, when I'm submitting homework assignments or working on things for class, that's when I also have questions. That's when either my spouse, my parent, or another loved one is asking me questions about my education that I might not know. Things again like, how much do I owe and what documents am I missing? When will I graduate? When's my next test in Bio 101? All of those things in a student's mind are equivalent to, hey, I'm working on algebraic equations and need help from my faculty. And frequently those things happen not during 9 to 5. So really the pain that we're trying to solve is to make it super, super easy for students to reach out to their institutions via any mode: chatbot, phone call, live chat, two-way text, web ticket, etc. Because every student is different and every student has different desires in terms of communication. So ultimately, that's what we're trying to solve in terms of a pain point, is provide top-level service, because we know, for example, the folks on this call and every institution in the country have that desire to provide the best service they can. Sometimes they're resource constrained, and that makes it very hard to do so.
Yeah, that's impressive. So if I go to evaluate AI technologies myself, what criteria do I use?
Yeah, it's a good question as well, because there's a lot out there. I think the lens that I would always use is back to that first question, right? When we bound the discussion with what are we trying to solve, I think that also helps drive the criteria. And that criteria really should be, do these tools make it easier for my student, for my customer, if you will, to get service? And again, imagine you're going out into your campus in person and you're asking 100 students. The idea is to make 90 to 95 of those 100 students say, yes, you know what, it's an academically challenging environment, but getting service should not be challenging. And we have found that it's easy. So I think the first criteria is it easy? And the second is it ubiquitous? Meaning, can I use it on any device, in any way, in any place, whether I'm on campus, at home, at work, etc. Because the whole idea is, even if something is easy, if it's not easy to access, it won't be used. So we really want to make something sort of have a zero learning curve, but we really also want it to be incredibly easy to access. And then the third criteria that I would say, and these are probably the most important three, there's many others, is, does it resolve the issue that student is reaching out for? And does it make it easy, if it doesn't resolve that question, to then reach to another support mechanism, be it a live chat agent like one of our team members, to answer those questions. So in the case of a chatbot, it should be very easy to find, very full and very rich with answers. And then if for some reason the chatbot can't answer every question, which of course no bot can, does it make it very easy for that student to escalate directly to a person 24/7?
Are there best practices around this for like managing and deploying AI in the higher education space?
Well, I would love to say that there are a huge number of best practices. The real answer is no, there aren't. It's very new. Chatbots are not new, but integrated chatbots and more powerful chatbots based on additional capabilities of AI are new. So there may be a mixture of best practices out there. We really felt, and we've spent quite a bit of time at Black Belt Help really deploying those and kind of building out those best practices. Internally, we call those case studies. And we define use cases so that we can try to make sure that we meet as many, if not all of those student, staff, and faculty queries as possible. Now, does that mean that we're perfect and we know every one of them? Of course not. But the goal is, I would say that our best practices are put in place by building those use cases and case studies that solve specific problems. And once we combine all of those into any of our tools, that becomes a best practice that ultimately has to drive student engagement up. It should never disappoint the student, and it should always drive that level of, do I feel more connected to my campus, up versus down?
So is that, with that being so new, I mean, is that how you measure success? How do you measure success?
Yeah, and that's a tough one too. When we launched our chatbots about 4 years ago, our first metrics of success were things like, did it resolve one question? Did the bot answer it correctly? And when a user gives feedback, was the feedback happy? And those were good metrics for success. But really, in today's world, we've got to go beyond that. What we're looking at now are areas around really the ability to measure a student's sort of sentiment, and we call it sentiment analysis. The idea is getting beyond just a single question of, did this answer your question, yes or no, and assuming that meant success, because it may or may not. And sometimes, as we all know in the student services world, we have to give answers that are not always popular. Things like, there is a balance due, or if you don't pay your balance, you might be deregistered. But there are ways to kind of measure that student sentiment by not only giving that answer, but then giving fallback support solutions. So, for example, if a student says something to a bot, I'm thinking about dropping out of school or dropping from my institution, we can ask the bot to ask several questions and probe without being too intrusive. But what we've seen, for example, in that example, is that many students at a community college may have to drop out because of transportation. It sounds simple, but it really is. Sometimes if a car breaks down in the morning or a child care provider is now not available suddenly, that student then is forced with choosing between a family support versus their own educational support. So what we want to do in those cases, whether it's a live person answering a call or a chatbot, is try to prompt some of those questions. And we can ask things like, are you having challenges with transportation to campus? And if a student says yes, most campuses in this country have things like emergency student loans or connections to off-campus transportation or public transportation, or certainly on-campus childcare. So we've always tried to look at the typical reasons why students are at risk or are at risk of stopping out and try to anticipate those with our tools. Because if we can ask that question and a student says, wow, yeah, the real reason I am thinking about dropping out is I just, lost my childcare provider because they moved away. I didn't even know that there were childcare services on campus. And now that I know, if you can connect me to someone on the childcare area or give me information about how to sign up, then I'll stay enrolled. And that's the whole goal.
Wow, that's a lot to think about. So with everybody on the call today, I mean, what do they look for in an AI help desk support partner? What's the criteria? What do I look for?
Yeah, I think the key, and I would say it's different than it was 5 years ago, right? 5 years ago, there were a lot of kind of point solutions that did one thing or two things. I think the most important thing when institutions are looking for solutions is to find a partner that can really meet multiple needs, even needs that you may not have yet. And let me explain what I mean by that. We do get a lot of phone calls and a lot of RFPs from institutions that may say, hey, I need an inbound contact center or a contact center as a solution provider. And we then kind of come back and say, well, that's great. We can do that for sure. But do you have a chatbot solution? Do you have a solution or a software product that provides your team on campus with an easier way of providing support to students directly. And sometimes those questions are like, wow, we didn't think about that. So I would say a really critical piece to that in sort of selecting a partner is looking at someone that can provide solutions from across different areas.
So what are some of the ways that Black Belt Help is leveraging AI to drive student engagement?
Yeah, so I think the biggest ways are, the most obvious are with chatbots and voice bots. The ability to answer both frequently asked questions, things like, it sounds silly, but if you're an institution in Minnesota in November, you get a lot of questions of, is your campus open today? And that may seem like a pretty easy thing, but if there are 7,000 or 8,000 phone calls coming in the morning, that can certainly distract staff from providing higher level services. So that's an FAQ chatbot or voice bot, and it can, answer questions like that. What's their school code? What's the weather like on campus? All of those types of things. But then the next level that we've offered in the last couple of years is really an integrated chat and voice bot. So then the student can go deeper. Well, great. Now that the institution's open, when is my next test? Where is my next course section meeting? How much aid do I have? I got a letter about being deregged. What does that mean, and how do I prevent that? It sounds bad, right? So a lot of times in higher education, we use terminology that students don't understand. And students are incredibly intelligent and super savvy, but we do have our own higher ed speak, is what I call it. So I think some of the areas where AI can really help are providing some of those tools that are beyond a mediated support, meaning that don't require a live person to always answer a phone or respond to an email. So chatbots and voice bots can be extraordinarily helpful. The other area that can be really helpful is two-way texting, because so many students will say things like, you know what, I really don't want to talk to someone. And I also really don't want to use a chatbot. I just want to text my question. It's really easy. How much do I owe? Why can't I text that to my institution and have a text come back that is specific to me? So those are some of the use cases among many, many other use cases that we look at to make sure that our tools can provide those types of solutions.
Excellent. So when most people think about AI, they think about chatbots. You've mentioned chatbots quite a bit. Can you talk about those and how they're used in our market?
Yeah, so I touched on a little bit earlier what we're not going to cover in today's call about chatbots, right? But I think the areas that really can provide support are really critical. And if you look at that kind of second keystone on the right of that graphic, the AI voice bot and chatbot, really designed to help students with self-service. In many cases, students are quite intelligent, quite savvy. They know exactly what they want to ask, but they might ask it in a way that is challenging for someone to understand. Well, with a chatbot or a voice bot, we can create multiple intents, meaning what do we think a person or a student is asking? So the student might say, how much do I owe? Where at an institution, someone might say, well, the bursar thinks that your current semester balance owed is, right? And the idea with a chatbot is to have multiple ways of asking that question so that the chatbot can understand that and answer correctly. Maybe a better example is when a student calls in or reaches out with a chatbot and says, what's the status of my application? Well, normally a normal bot might just say, oh, well, you've been admitted already. Well, what if the student's asking about their financial aid application or their housing application or their application for graduation? So what's better to do in those cases is to have a chatbot that either uses things like chips or prompts a student to say, well, I see that you have multiple applications at our institution. What is your request about? And we can either use kind of a self-guided tutorial in a chatbot to do that, or do that in a voice case as well. So that's one example, really, I think of some of the complexities that are within higher ed, but the way that we can kind of deal with them is to break them down to their simplest terms and have a bot, be it a voice bot or a chat bot, walk a student through those scenarios. The last thing that I'll say is that sometimes, like I do love to use chatbots, but at some point it might just be easier for me to say, you know what, I just want to speak to a person. I know it's 10 o'clock at night, but I really want to speak to a person. And what we'll get, and we'll create intents in the bot that says, speak to a human, get me someone with a pulse, who's alive over there, right? Sometimes that sounds a little, trite, but that's how students will ask those questions. So whenever we see those, and hear those, we can respond with, would you like us to transfer you to an agent right now? There's also always a button that says transfer me to get support as well. So that's the idea behind really the power of those chatbots and what we think they can do. But the most important thing is to always give students a way to escalate, and to escalate at 24/7, meaning call right to one of our agents.
Cool. Okay, so chatbots are great, but what are some of the compatible ways AI can be used in our market?
Yeah, and actually, let's go back one slide as well. I think one of the most compatible ways are some of these other keystones on this wheel. So we mentioned and talked about two-way texting, which is SMS nudging. Nudging is just a fancy word to say, I want to text my question and I want to get a text response back. The key, though, is to have all of these technologies work interrelatedly. So if I start my experience on a chatbot, and then I want to send a text, and then I want to escalate to a person, the key is that chat transcript needs to capture all of that data and make sure it's being shared among those different tools. But what's different then beyond just chatbots, voice bots, and nudging is a tool that we have called Advisor Desktop. And we sort of developed this tool many, many years ago for use in our call centers so that we can answer questions much faster. And we kind of have down there capture, route, and manage. In a better way, it's really just how do we provide better customer service? What we found when working with institutions in my time in higher ed is whether your institution uses, an Ellucian Banner or a PeopleSoft solution or a Workday solution or a Genzabar SIS or ERP solution, is that in many cases, all of those, in other words, it's very good at storing data, but it's very difficult and requires going in and out of sometimes 15 to 18 screens to answer different questions from students. What that means is there's chances for error, number one, but it also takes probably what a student would assume is a 5-minute interaction and makes it 30 minutes because someone at the college has to go in and out of different screens. Potentially then if the student asks a question about LMS, move in and out of an LMS system and or a CRM as well. So the whole idea with Advisor Desktop, and we'll get to that in a moment, show you what that means, is making it easy to serve up content to a student and answer questions. So let's jump ahead a slide real quick and get back on track because I pulled us back to here just for a moment. I think we covered the chatbots really well. The concept there is that they're super low maintenance. They really reduce errors because all that content has been created by us, has been approved by any of our clients before it goes live, but it really drives a super fast response time and a conversion rate, meaning that student gets their questions answered super, super fast. The idea there is it really reduces inbound calls to the point where, number one, that's manageable on campus, and it frees up the staff to really do what they're there to do. If they're in the financial aid office, it's to package aid. If they're a registrar, maybe it's to evaluate transcripts or evaluate graduation. If they're a bursar, it's to figure out bills and tuition and to make sure that those are correct. So that's kind of the power of a chatbot. And let's go to this next slide, which is what we were talking about with Advisor Desktop. And again, the idea there is a tool that just makes it super, super easy to provide service on campus. So we built this tool initially, again, as I said, to help our call center team reduce that interaction down to about a 5 or 8 minute interaction, because a student's going to ask 15 different questions from all over campus, right? When's my next test? Who's my faculty advisor? How much do I owe? What am I missing for financial aid? And when will I graduate? Or what happens if I drop out? So those questions could be very, very challenging to answer without a tool like this. What we then found is institutions were calling us and saying, okay, so how in the world do you answer these things so quickly when our front counter staff takes 30 minutes to do it? So that's when we kind of said, you know what, again, our customers are pulling us through a channel, right? They're telling us things like, I need a tool like that on my campus. So I may have a physical one-stop on campus, but if it's either multiple desks or different versions or requires a student to be kind of moved around in a single building, then that doesn't make that student feel very comfortable that the institution is doing its best. So this tool really makes it easy to take one location and triage, 80 to 90% of any student question they may have, because now they don't have to log in and out of an SIS or log in and out of an LMS or a CRM, because that has the admissions data. Or if a student asks a grade, that's in the LMS, or asks about their balance due, that's in the ERP or SIS. So the idea there is to make it super easy in one screen to see the data across an enterprise for that institute, for that student, and then answer any number of questions for that student. It really reduces cost, and it takes, again, that 30-minute interaction and makes it about a 5-minute interaction. And I think what really makes students the most happy is they're never transferred across campus, right? That's the idea, because we all hate if we go in and we say, well, great, that's a good question, but now you have to go see the registrar, or now you need to go talk to the bursar's office, and that's 3 doors down or across campus. And that's the idea behind the software of Advisor Desktop, is to make it easy to serve those students.
So what are some of the software applications that you're working with, and why is that so important?
Yeah, and it kind of transitions into this slide here, right? It's, again, we've offered services for a long time, right? Inbound, phone calls, web tickets, basically any mode of support that a student may have, inbound and outbound. But again, what we found is that some institutions have told us, you know what, I've actually got more than enough staff to handle those questions. What I need is a tool on my campus that makes that interaction faster. Because what happens is at the beginning of the semester or the beginning of the summer term, or at any time throughout the year, maybe if you have rolling admission, the lines can be very long. And what happens is a student will go from office to office and see long lines and be put at risk, right? At risk of dropping out. The frustration factor, if you will. And the idea behind additionally now offering software, be it a chatbot or Advisor Desktop, to meet those student needs on campus, that's the idea of really trying to combine both services and software to meet whatever that institution's needs are. I'll give you an example. We've talked to some extremely large institutions, 50,000 plus students. And what we've heard from them consistently is, I have enough staff. I have enough student workers. What I don't have is a tool that makes it easy for my team to look up those questions and answers. Or I don't have an easy tool that I can put a sign up at my campus door that says, do you have any of these types of questions? A chatbot that's integrated can answer them. So that's kind of the idea behind both a services and software solution at a company, so that we can meet whatever that need is. Because of all of our services and software products, we can deploy one of them or all of them to meet whatever is specifically needed by that institution.
Great. Next slide, please.
So some of the benefits, I think we've covered a lot of these. I think it comes back to your question, Brandon, of why and how would you choose a partner to help you meet student expectations and staff and faculty expectations in terms of those queries. These are some of the benefits. We're not going to certainly cover all of them. I think we've covered a majority of them. I think the big ones to just call out, number one, are security. Because security is just an enormous issue today. It is role-based, it's also client-based, and it's completely transaction-driven. PII is never stored, meaning if a student asks a question, none of that data is stored in a chat transcript. But there's a full transactional history of what system or person provided answers to that student. And then the next piece that's kind of right behind security is compliance, right? So ensuring that everything is FERPA compliant, making sure that students are validated as to who they are before information that's student specific is given out. And then also just being ISO compliant as well. So I mentioned those two things just because for so many folks in the IT side, those can be deal breakers to looking at how to help support those institutions. I think the ultimate issue here is, how do we provide cost savings, but then increase user, meaning student, staff, or faculty satisfaction? And sometimes those things seem at odds, but they're not. With technology today and the ability to use things like chatbots and Advisor Desktop solutions, we can dramatically reduce the cost to provide those services, but greatly expand access and drive up student satisfaction at the same time. And those are the goals.
So back to my question, what are some of the software applications you're working with, and why is it important?
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about our solutions, and excuse me for that, but we do, of course, then have to integrate to everything in the market. So these are some of our kind of most critical or most heavily used out-of-the-box integrations. So many institutions use Salesforce for their CRM. They may use Zendesk or Team Dynamics for their ITSM or ticketing solution or capital management solutions. They may be working with someone like you already at Quick Launch, right? For all the different solutions that you offer. They probably have some type of an SIS or ERP system, be it Colleague or Banner or Workday or PeopleSoft or Genzabar. And they certainly have maybe one, if not multiple, learning management systems or LMSs as well. So when we launched our products, we knew that they had to kind of out of the box be integrated with these solutions. The good news is all these solutions have APIs, and they're fairly easy now to integrate to. But we know that institutions may have customized these types of solutions for their needs. So that's why we do provide a team of IT professionals that can work out that 20 to 30% that may be different across the board between institutions on any of these products.
So do you have a live client success story that you can talk about?
Yeah, and you know, we figured that would be a question from the audience. So thanks, Brennan, for bringing it up. And we wanted to have some folks that, you know, give you an idea of what those success stories look like. One of them is the City College of San Francisco and Ellen Reyes. Ellen has just been a fantastic partner. You've heard me use the word partner a lot today. And what we have found is when we look at our clients as partners and they see us as partners, it really creates sort of an ecosystem where we rely on each other. We know, for example, that Ellen at CCSF knows CCSF better than we ever will. But she knows that we want to partner with her to learn as much about her institution as possible and deploy solutions that help out. And when we say help out, we mean some of the statistics that are at the bottom. So, for example, they've always used us for inbound and both IT and LMS and student service questions. But we also saw that that volume was going up and up every year, meaning the cost was getting higher. And Ellen came to us and said, hey, how do we help contain the cost? And we said, well, the easy way is to avoid phone calls altogether. Let's deploy a chatbot. Let's deploy two-way texting, because those things are significantly less expensive. So what we have found with her chatbot is we've been able to deflect about 20% of her phone volume, which means a 20% savings in her contract. So that's been a big help for her and for her internally to sell projects and to keep those projects going. But we've also then tracked, because we then brought a chatbot in, we need to track then what's that resolution rate, basically the success rate, meaning that 97% of the time when those questions are asked to the bot can respond and respond with an answer that meets that student's need. I think the last two stats, though, are the most important. The first one is 1353. We just sort of have a little bit of internal terminology around that. We say 1353 a lot. And what that really means is, as we started tracking the number of hours that we're saving Ellen's staff on campus, that's what we found from just the chatbot in terms of then taking that burden off of her staff to answer questions. So roughly 1,300 hours a month of staff time are saved. What that enabled her to do is then go back to her teams and say, guess what, team? We now can focus more on what we probably got into student services for, to take those really tough questions, to really serve a student that may walk up to the counter and say, I think I have to drop out today. Because that's not a 5-minute interaction. That's a 30-minute counseling session that may be related to childcare, transportation, poor grades, health issues with the family, who knows what. So that's a really critical success factor that I think we're very proud of, is giving institutions back time to do what they love best, which is to serve students and to perform the functions that they're in their offices for. And then the last statistic there you can see is pretty straightforward, a 90% student sat rating. It's funny, every so often I'll have someone ask me, well, how come it's not 98%? And I just kind of respond with, how is it ever 98%? When you go to your doctor or to your place to get your car repaired, or whatever your example is for a service scenario, world-class service really is what we call 80 and 8. greater than 80% satisfied and less than 8% dissatisfied. We strive to hit 90% satisfied because we really feel like then we're kind of knocking it out of the park. And sometimes it's impossible to get to 98 or 96 or whatever percent or 100% because sometimes we're having to give bad news. Things like, you didn't apply for financial aid yet, but let me help you do that right now, right? So that sometimes can make students unhappy, but as long as we focus on how do we try to change the scenario for the better, it helps to keep that satisfaction rating at a level that, that we're proud of. So those are some of the metrics that we measure. We also measure, of course, contact center metrics. How fast are we serving? What's the satisfaction? What are the types of interactions that we're having? Repeat questions. And those are all things that we feed back to Ellen and her team to look at ways to make improvements. Because if we're getting a lot of questions, for example, around one of my favorite topics is applying to graduate, right? Because here's a case where students have maybe gone to your institution for 2 years or 4 years or however long. They've done all the things you've asked them to do, and now you make them apply to graduate. In my world, that should be something the institution does for the student automatically. Hey, guess what, student? Here's a text message saying you're going to graduate next fall. I know it's complex, and I certainly don't mean to be pejorative, but that's one of my pet peeves where it's sort of like, you've done all the things that we've asked you, but now we're going to ask you to do one last thing. And who better would know if you're ready to graduate but us as the institution? So in many ways, I think those are some of the things that we can all do better in the higher ed world of looking at things that today we just probably ask students to do because either we're resource constrained or because they've always been that way. And we can kind of work together. And that's what we do with our partners and our partner clients is how do we remove some of those barriers for students to make it as easy to get service as it is to go to class.
Interesting. Who are some of the institutions you're partnering with?
Well, here's a couple of them. It really is very different. I mentioned what we call some of the different verticals within higher ed, right? The 4-year privates, the 4-year publics, the 2-year publics, and others. But here's just a kind of a collection of institutions that really do run the gamut from, a very highly selective institution like Cornell or Tufts to an incredibly large and highly focused on customer service institution like Capella or Fairleigh Dickinson. So not that those institutions are not as selective, but their value add at Capella is just top-notch customer service along with top-notch teaching. So those are some of the folks that we work with in the 4-year private space, but we also work with some very large and some very small 4-year publics, very large like UCLA and more on the smaller side like Fitchburg State. So it kind of runs that gamut. And then in the community college sector, you can see those do tend to be larger institutions like Pasadena City College, Riverside, or Pima in Arizona. Typically our kind of sweet spot is an institution that is greater than about 2,500 students, because they're then probably struggling with resources and struggling to keep up with student demands.
Excellent. I do have some questions from the audience that have been coming in over the last little while. Are you up to a couple questions?
I would love it. And I know I've been talking a lot, so I'd love to have some interaction too. That'd be great. Thanks, Brandon.
Very cool. So here's one that came in earlier. I'm going to take them as the order they came in. I'm curious how chatbots work within FERPA parameters. Answer detailed specific questions.
Yeah, good question. So in any case, it's easy for a chatbot to do the very FAQ type questions or frequently asked questions. But the moment that a student has done things like, hey, what's your federal school code? Is your campus open today? Those all things a chatbot can answer very quickly and doesn't really need to know who's asking those questions. But once a student asks a question like, have you received my FAFSA? Or what is my GPA? Or how much do I owe? FERPA does require that student to authenticate themselves before we give an answer. Whether that's with a person or with a tool like a chatbot, it doesn't matter. So what we do is part of our implementation with institutions is we look at their authentication protocol. It's typically a 3-part protocol. It could be something like a unique ID of their ERP or SIS, followed by the last 4 of a student social, or a partial of an address, or a partial of a phone number. Every institution is going to be different. And whether there's 2 steps, 3 steps, or 4 levels of authentication, each of our tools is individualized for each student, for each institution. And that way, the moment that a student says, how much do I owe? the chatbot will prompt them to authenticate and log in. And that's how we meet and maintain FERPA standards, because then we know we're talking to that student, as well as you would know at the front counter or on the phone.
Excellent. Where do you think AI will be in another 5 years?
Oh, gosh.
Good
Okay,
luck.
so first of all, if I knew that, I'd be a wealthy individual, and I'm not. So it's funny, without being too personal, my wife's a realtor, and every day someone asks her, where should I buy? Where's the interest rate going? So I've taken that answer from her because she's really intelligent. And that answer is, who knows? No. I think within 5 years, we can guess. I think within 5 years, you're going to get much more cognitive decision-making from a bot. You're going to get much higher levels of predictability, because now that we can feed a bot with data of, for example, I mentioned earlier that we take about 1.5 million students that we serve and serve even a larger number of interactions. All of that data is captured in a ticket. And those tickets can then be fed into an AI tool. And the more data that you give an AI tool, the more predictive it can be. So if a student called in and said, hey, what's my balance due? The AI bot can almost now do it, but very, very soon we'll be able to say, my guess is you're asking that question because you have a balance due and maybe you're subject to deregistration. Let me help you prevent that from happening. Because we know that sort of deregging a student is what I call the nuclear option. It really makes the student very, very unhappy. It makes the institution unhappy. But more importantly, the student now probably can't get into those classes they had before. And it may delay their success, their graduation or their certificate. So I think one of the things that we're looking forward to in the next several months to the next year timeframe is, how do we help the bot be much more predictive based on feeding it data from the interactions that the institution as a whole is getting? Because every institution is going to be different. But if when the bot starts to see 10 or 15 questions come in on a single day, maybe even in a single hour, that is around priority registration, then maybe that's a friction point that we could find a way to make smoother so that the question doesn't come up. Or maybe we need to push a text message out to a student automatically that says, tomorrow is pre-registration date, but only for these students, and have that message only go to those students versus every student. Right? Instead of kind of the blanket email that many institutions will send out that says, if you're in this category of A to L, you're this day, and M to whatever, you're the next day. So those are some of the things that I think it can do very, very soon. 3 to 5 years, wow, sky's the limit. But I do sincerely hope that, as we've all seen in the news, some of these very, very high level technology summits that are going on between, frankly, it sounds silly, but world leaders and technology company leaders need to be resolved, because very, very shortly, the ability of a bot will exceed the ability maybe of a bot to know what is the right level of a limit in terms of discussing things that are personal or private.
Speaking of getting that information, how does this is another question, how does one chatbot connect to different ERPs on campus to provide the right information to a student, like the class schedule, balance of account, health services? How does the chatbot work with getting the data and ingesting it into the AI platform?
Yeah, and it used to be that was what I used to call a moonshot, right? Or anti-gravity, solving anti-gravity. 10 years ago, the ability to integrate those tools was a moonshot. It was incredibly difficult and took thousands of hours. Today, it's really pretty easy. And the chatbot knows, and working with those tools APIs, but more importantly, with our experience in working with all those different tools, be it Colleague, Banner, Workday, et cetera, we have kind of pre-built data element dictionaries that say, for these questions, we know where those answers live. And they certainly need to be reviewed for each institution because they can be different. But that's how we've gotten the bot to be integrated to those different systems across campus that probably today are not integrated on their own before we started working with a partner institution.
Interesting. How long is a typical implementation timeline for Advisor Desktop?
Yeah, so that's a question we get a lot. So Advisor Desktop, again, being that tool that we can deploy on a campus that integrates those different systems, that can be anywhere from about 4 to 6 weeks. Most of that time really is reviewing the data element dictionary and the integrations with the IT team. We kind of pre-build those But we always want to make sure and test with the institution. And sometimes that time period also can be related to staff vacations at an institution and things like that. So we typically would say anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, maybe a little bit longer for much more complex integrations. But that's about where we see those projects take.
Excellent. If there's any other questions, we'll make sure to get back with you via email or some other method to answer some of these questions. That's all the time we have, I think. We're right up against the hour, and we really want to appreciate and thank Anthony for taking his time to answer all these questions about AI and Black Belt Help. And it's very interesting. It's intriguing information. So thank you very much.
Well, and thank you, Brandon. And I really want to thank the attendees. I know it is extraordinarily difficult, having been in some of your shoes at institutions, to get away. So I want to applaud the attendees for being able to kind of peel themselves away from the very busy work of being on campus to look at additional solutions. And again, I want to thank you, Brandon, as well, for all of your help in moderating and setting it up. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Everybody have a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye.